Well, the world's diplomatic heavyweights are gathering in Vancouver tonight for a one-day summit on the North Korea nuclear problem. Foreign affairs ministers from about 20 countries are expected to talk stepped-up enforcement of sanctions against the rogue regime, but two critical partners in the effort will be missing. China and Russia were not invited, and neither is happy. Today, Russian Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov blasted the meeting as detrimental to a solution.
It's sad that the United States once again gives a reason to doubt their ability to be reliable contract partners. Speaking of one of the possible consequences, if they demand from Kim Jong-un that he stop his military nuclear program, and in exchange, they promise that sanctions will be lifted, this is the exact baseline of the agreement reached between Iran and the international community.
Well, to size up the possibilities or obstacles, we're joined from Toronto by former Foreign Affairs Minister Peter McKay. Mr. McKay, a summit where two of the three neighboring countries to North Korea are not invited. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it is curious, and as you point out, the actual outcomes then will be very much in question. China and Russia have an enormous voice in this. They're also UN Security Council members. China, as a neighbor, and the country in which North Korea relies heavily for its energy, I think they do about 90% of their trade with China, has enormous influence. Where this meeting is about sanctions in particular, where in spite of all the sanctions, I believe I saw recently that North Korea's economy still grew by 4%. So it still has room in terms of the international community's efforts to curtail their activities through sanctions. It does bring into question just how much influence this discussion can and will have. And there are a lot of other intriguing, perhaps peripheral issues that play into this, and perhaps even some other motives that are not quite as apparent.
What do you think those would be? Because I'm still at a loss to figure out what Greece and Denmark and Sweden will contribute to this summit that China and Russia couldn't. I mean, it seems to me that's a no-brainer.
Well, one interpretation is that this is an effort on the part of the United States to build a bit of a coalition of the willing. A less, perhaps, conspiratorial view would be that they're trying to get impressions and input from other important countries and Western countries that they do business with, and also check in on the sanctions and what, if anything, can be done further in the sanctions space to pressure North Korea. For Canada, there is always the goodwill that it engenders to be the host country. It's perhaps an opportunity for us to make up some goodwill for walking away from the table at TPP or coming back from China empty-handed. I don't know what the United States has asked of Canada or what the expectations are. I think Canada has to manage expectations here, because at the end of the day, I'm not sure that we're going to see much in the way of deliverables. It's interesting to note that the U.S. Defense Secretary, James Mattis, is going to be present. One concern that I would have is that the North Koreans, as they're prone to do, and Kim Jong-un in particular, sees a paranoid effort by the United States to rally Western countries for military intervention or military pressures, upping what we're already seeing as an escalation in the Asia-Pacific. I hope that's not the case. But, you know, we've seen worse, and, you know, the tweets continue unabated. That is not a positive sign. On a positive side, we have seen, of course, some talks between North and South Korea, and an indication from Kim Jong-un that they want to send a delegation to the Winter Olympics. This is a very positive development. And I suspect the six-party talks are where the real heavy lifting will be done if there's a full engagement between North and South.
I wouldn't mind you putting your former defense minister hat on for a little bit on this question. I thought it was kind of strange that Chief of Defense Staff Jonathan Vance told the Globe and Mail, well, you know, we've got ships that are capable of assisting if required to sort of form that blockade around North Korea. Is that a smart position to take, given what you just said about military ramping up?
I don't think more saber rattling at this critical point is helpful, quite frankly. I'm not disagreeing with the Chief of Defense Staff, John Vance, that we do have the ability to assist, particularly around naval blockades, and the refueling of our ships at sea is another question. We'd have to rely on our allies for that. But there is a tremendous American presence, as you know, in the South China Sea, where there are other tensions at play, including those that China has with its neighbors. There's a big American presence in Guam and in Japan. So the countries who are participating in this may be hoping to engender their own military protection and their own further support from the United States of America. And that's what I mean when I say that there are other agendas here. There's also the agenda that Canada hopes to gain a seat at the Security Council. I don't know that this will advance our bid there, nor do I know whether there is any quid pro quo around NAFTA. That's another interesting, perhaps conspiratorial theory.
Oh, there's a lot of tangled web here. Peter McKay, always a pleasure having you on. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Don. All the best.